Good evening and welcome to this episode of Science is Your World. I'm your host this evening, Mike Shacklock. Joining me this evening I have a gentleman who normally brings all sorts of vivid and wonderful underwater video shots, and indeed he's going to be doing that again tonight, but he also has something interesting to present and talk about right off the beginning, the top. And I'm talking about our guest this evening, Gilbert van Rijkerswall. Good evening, Gilbert.
Good evening, Mike.
Okay, what I have in my hand here is something that Gilbert has created. It is a tribute to the salmon water Canadian wilderness rivers. He's inscribed on the side here, a global benchmark for natural fresh water. And what it is a natural sea stone that he's treated in a certain way and then carved some interesting characters on it. And perhaps I should let Gilbert tell us more about what he's done here.
I'll be glad to. My rocks such as you have a specimen in your hands, Mike, I call eco-time rocks. And eco-time rocks means they are ecological facts of significance that we wish to remember when we visit a place, and where we remember, we put a date on such a visit, and so we have the evidence of an ecological fact of significance. And in this case, as I am specialized in underwater photography, I've spent a lot of my working life diving in rivers where I portray the quality of our natural freshwater, because I identified that as a cause to specialize with my photography on.
And what sort of things have you tried to depict on the characters and animals that are on here? Just the one species?
That's very interesting. You say that because I wondered myself first, how am I going to render such an idea? First, when you present the rivers, you should, and you talk about the natural condition, then that natural condition is identified by the life that it supports. And we have a great variety of species, of course, in our rivers, but one outstanding fish is the Atlantic salmon. And the Atlantic salmon is living here in quite a number of rivers, and as you are going further north, where the population is getting thinner, and you're coming into wilderness areas, there are more and more of these fish left, and populations are still wild as they developed through time in those rivers and still exist there. In contrast, many countries around the North Atlantic basin, on the European side and around to the North American side, had salmon in all the major rivers, like for example the Rhine and the Loire and the rivers that go into the East Sea and Scandinavia and Russia, and of course in the northern region of the Arctic Ocean, where you go to Siberia, you still have salmon, but many of the other rivers have lost their salmon populations, and they're trying to clean them up, and in this cleanup they're trying to rehabilitate the salmon, and often they are using salmon eggs that have been brought from here, and so we are I am symbolizing that quality of fresh water, both in my photography and in my art. And you see other examples such as these stones. I do them in small to quite large specimen, and it's I believe, a unique new craft art which I have not seen anywhere else, other than that I may have been inspired by the scrimshaw that sailors of the whaling
Back to the ancient mariner
times
days, yes.
the ancient mariners were doing, and I've been collecting some of those on auctions that we have in our province. But that's the story of the stones. And
that's an extremely clever thing to do. I would never have thought myself to undertake anything like that, but you're obviously not only a capable artistic person with a video camera, but certainly with this. These are natural stones. You haven't done anything too much. I understand you changed the color of them.
The stones are amazingly perfect, and they are buffeted by truly timeless wave action on our ocean shores. And the more rough the action is, the smoother the rocks become. You have to think that when the rock is in the water, then you have to subtract the volume of that rock from the weight that the stone has. And so the stone becomes much lighter. Yes. And so when you have a strong action of waves, and the stones are lighter, you get almost a soup. And you get this whole bank of stones that are continuously buffeting each other as if they, as a mixture of stones and water, and it has been going on like that since the ice ages. And it's hard to, when you look at the perfection of these natural stones, you ask yourself, well, what could I do with it? And it took some time, I must say. From the first primitive experiments that I did, I developed this new idea, and I'm showing the motion of water as a indication in the picture that portrays that motion in which the fish, that element that the fish are in. And I know it very well because when you're in the rivers, you see the stones, and the stones have been drilling into the bedrock, usually in this sort of whirlpool fashion, and really drilled into the bedrock, and you get holes, and as a Dutchman, I say they look like cheese holes.
Oh, Swiss and that style of cheese, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the water action that you see, and when you're in it, you feel it also. And then, of course, the salmon are a splendid large fish. They have a lifestyle which we can come to when we are looking at them in the video later on. But we have, at this time of the year, where we are coming close to the spring, we have this very fascinating program of species that are coming into our rivers. And we start there with the smelt that are coming into many of the smaller brooks and rivers. They're also being fished during the winter time, but when the smelt come into the rivers, they want to spawn.
Yes.
And I have been in those rivers where you see more fish than water. It's just absolutely incredible.
It's crowded.
Walls of these tiny little fish. And I brought some video that shows, that gives you some idea of what that looks like. And it is just something that also attracts the people who want to eat the fish. And I'm looking at them, I want to film them. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes eat them too. I love to eat fish, but I realized that since there are only very few rivers and brooks even in our area here, where you can see these vast amounts of tiny fish, at the same time when I'm there are lots of people that are fishing them whole scale, and that is the way we took them out some other rivers where they have disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Just overdone it completely, and taken them all away.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps we should have a look at the video, because you do bring really good videos on the underwater activities. So let's have a look.
Yeah. These are literally thousands of tiny smelt. They are about 4 or 5 inches in length. They come into the first mile, or maybe the first kilometer only, of, in this case, the Portapique River. And when that happens in the month of May, the river, in some of those spots, the river's black, and that is just solid fish. And most of our rivers used to have this phenomenon. Here you see them come back. They have to get used to my presence too, and then they scare away. But then eventually they overcome their fright, and I can be with them. And it's just amazing to be in this natural phenomenon of these thousands and thousands of fish, tiny little fish. The water is only 3-4 feet deep there, and that's a hole. And during the night, they spawn in just inches of water, and the whole place is just alive of these tiny little smelts.
So this is an extremely healthy environment. Where was this again?
This is the Portapique River on the Bay of Fundy.
On the Bay of Fundy.
This is close to Bass River, Forestboro.
Okay.
Sure. I think most of those little rivers at that time have the smelt, running. Yeah. And this is the first of the anatomous species, which means that ocean fish are coming into the rivers because the rivers are providing them with a protected environment that has the food that the juvenile forms of those species could dwell on until they grow to a size where they then change over into the salt water again and live their life phase in the salt water and then be mature, and that's the cycle of life that happens again and again, you know. And then we're coming here to a river. The rivers are showing all kinds of life. Just that muskrat that you saw in there, who was building his nest inside, or bringing some of the...
That's him there?
That's him. Oh yeah. And they're very trusting creatures. Real close up to them. And of course, these are, you can get real close up too. These are not so, they are not per se aware that much of you. These are lamprey eels.
Lamprey.
Yeah, and I filmed those in the Shubenacadie River last year. And these lamprey eels are parasitic fish that in the ocean suck themselves to the sides of other fish and live off their body juices. When they come into the rivers, they are not really bothering anybody. They just look ugly to us, and we don't want to eat them. But in some places, like France, for example, they are regarded a delicacy. But that's how man is, you know. But here, this lamprey eel is so much involved in his spawning cycle that he is spawning with stones, and he is also pulling the stones out to make cavities in the river, which are construction works at times when you see it, you know. Tons and tons of rocks are being pulled out by these fish one by one, and they deposit their eggs in between the rocks, like the salmon and other fish do too. And then it takes, I believe, several years in the case of the lampreys for the alevins to come out. The young lamprey larvae, they come out, and they're just like glass eels that you see of the freshwater eel here, that are coming from the ocean into the river. The lamprey glass eel is about the same size, a little smaller, goes the opposite way, because the lamprey is an anatomous fish and the eel is a catadromous fish. That means that the eel is a freshwater fish that spawns in the Sargasso Sea, and so anatomous and catadromous are the opposite functions of spawning and living habitats for these species. And interesting is to observe how the freshwater eel benefits from the lampreys. they're all benefiting from each other. So this whole program of species that are coming into the rivers, which starts with the smelt, then you have the alewives, or the gaspereau, that are coming in vast numbers. And then you have the river herring, which is another species of the gaspereau. And then you get the lampreys, and they come and go. And as they come and go, there's a lot of mortality, or a fair amount of mortality, nothing unusual. But the eels know how to time their return to the ocean to go spawning when the alewives are coming up. And they can then feed themselves full before they get into the ocean on these species. And it's just interesting to see how this all interacts. And when you see this year after year, you really know how fragile everything is, because it is a program in which each chain part is part of the whole thing. And if one chain is taken out, it might eradicate the rest of that chain, you know.
Some influence.
So now here we are coming to, this is the Cheticamp River, where I was 2 years ago. And you are looking at salmon parr. And salmon parr is where the salmon, of course, is an anadromous fish. The juvenile salmon lives 2 or 3 years. That is the parr phase of the salmon. Lives in the rivers and depends entirely on the microscopic and macroscopic life of the creatures that live in the river. That's what the salmon parr lives on, and you'll see at a certain moment how the parr is. They are in this position, and they are taking the nutrients out of the water. They're feeding. Here, this little one is actively feeding and looking at everything over, as you see there. And that salmon parr will smoltify. That means that the program of the DNA program of that species is timed that the fish should move to the ocean now, and then they become silvery. They form groups or schools, and they swim to the estuary and get used to the salt water, and then disappear into the Atlantic. And then after 1 year, they come back as a 3-4-pound grills. Or they come back after 2 years as a 2-sea fish, or and then they may spawn already as grills after 1 year, but they can also they can return to the ocean, come back, and do that several times if they survive what is happening on this pathway, because these fish are just incredible survivors, but there is a tremendous mortality on them too. And the salmon are traveling to the northern waters of Greenland, and they are feeding on the tremendously rich planktonic and shrimp presence that lives in the northern Atlantic, and they'll come back, they'll feed themselves and grow within 1 year from a tiny fish to a 3-4 pound fish, and every year they double the weight. And so when they come back, they enter the river, and their system switches over to living on their own fat. And so the salmon that comes in the river is one that has all the energy with him that can last for half a year or longer in the river, and so they can really fast that long, but they shrink, and they become eventually, they're called slinks after the spawning, which happens in the fall period of the year, and they don't look anywhere like the vigorous fish that you see there. But it's just absolutely fascinating to dive in these rivers, and particularly that the Cheticamp River is magnificent because the water has eroded into the bedrock, and you have a canyon river there, and the fish are lying on the bedrock there, and you are in there, and you're also becoming subject to the aquadynamic forces of water. Mm-hmm. And the current is interesting. As you can see this here, the fish are showing the wrong way. And I say the wrong way because the current is coming towards us here, mm-hmm. and the fish should face the current. But what happens is you get an inversion of the current. The current is very fast on the surface, and because there is no current on the bottom, you get a suction effect, and that suction effect creates the opposite current underneath. So the fish are facing the current, which is opposite from what you see on the surface. The fishermen there, I tell them sometimes, I say, if you fish, you have to realize that current is the opposite current that the fish are facing.
You mentioned before that the life of these fish is dependent on the stresses that they have in their migratory activities. Is the Cheticamp River a violent river?
The Cheticamp River is a very small river, and it becomes a very powerful maelstrom of melting waters every year at springtime. Mm-hmm. And many of our rivers, when you look at them, you know that what has shaped them cannot have been the mild currents that are caused by the thaw every year, but they must have been created by the incredible quantities of water that have run through them when the ice when the great land ice masses were melting, and that melting water was going through there, and so you would have a virtual maelstrom of water that would make the stones waterborne. And when you then get this
bubbling and boiling
action of you call it the whirlpool action, you actually get a drill action, and that drill action, that drills holes into the bedrock, and one hole next to the other breaks off, and that way you get a very narrow, deep canyon. Sometimes I've been diving in some of those rivers that are only 7-8 feet wide, or maybe 3-4 feet wide, and go 20 feet down, or 30 feet. So and then with scuba gear, I go underneath, and I'm into these caverns, and I have this beautiful clear water, and I'm looking against the light, and I see a school of salmon hanging in there, and eventually the salmon will accept my presence, and I can move right in amongst them and photograph them from close up, touch them, and so on.
It seemed like that they were resting rather calmly there, so I wondered whether it was a turbulent river, but obviously it has been or can be at times.
It can be, like this particular scene that you see here, it's always on the surface. There's no resistance for the water on the surface, because that's where the surface is fastest. But on the bottom, you get all these obstructions. And this leads to a phenomenon which is fascinating, because when you look at the side of the fish, you'll see what is called a lateral line. And with the lateral line, they have an incredible sensor which replaces their eyesight. Because when the water is dark or at night, they entirely depend on their pressure sensing. So when the current comes down stream and the fish go upstream, they feel where the pressure waves are standing off the obstructions that are underneath, and they just follow the path of least resistance that they don't need to see. They feel it, And when you're in there as a diver and you are a little bit used to what these aquadynamic forces are like, so that you can move comfortably in them, you know what they are doing because you start doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So you can learn how to look after yourself by watching the fish themselves.
Yeah. And so when I'm in the pool, this is called the Chance Pool in the Cheticamp River, you have a number of big boulders in there, and the water runs through one spot real fast, and in other spots it is going as if you are in a house. The current's going in all kinds of different ways, counter currents, in the same depth of 3 or 4 feet. You can have on the bottom a counter current, like you saw before, from the top, and you can move with it. And if you know that, you just take a breath, and you have yourself transported easily by that counter current where you want to go. And so it becomes an effort that is controlled because you know how to handle the situation, and it's just absolutely delightful. You know, I just move in, and the fish, after a while, get used to my presence and accept me because I'm not bothering them, and I can film them from close up. You know. So here we are coming into a new scene, which is the spawning of the Atlantic salmon. And this scene was shot in the Exploits River in Newfoundland, and we have a number of fish that are at that stage of their stay in the river. They are very dark, and they have sort of colored to their environment, and they are there in a very shallow pool, maybe 2.5 feet, and those are fish, 7 or 8 pound fish. And they are there because it is in that habitat of shallow water that they want the juveniles to live, because the depth of the water sort of decides what size the young salmon has. As the young salmon goes in deeper water, there are more and bigger predators there, and you don't find them in that shallow water. And the little fish need to be exactly there where they have a maximum of food and oxygen and least predators and so on. And as they grow, they are being decimated by all these factors, and this natural selection creates the beautiful, strong salmon that we know as a fish that returns from the ocean to spawn again, you know.
Okay, well, Gilbert, that's brought us to the close of another very interesting program. I'd like to thank you for coming and speaking to us and introducing us to your new form of artwork and talking to us about it and showing us once again the wonderful shots of the salmon and the eels and the smelts. So thanks once again for coming.
It's a pleasure.
That brings this episode of Science is Your World to a close. Join us again next time.